All right, so we are going to start off our discussion of the major molecules of life by looking at carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are best known for their ability to store energy. However, they also serve an important role in the structure of many organisms. We're going to see that they are polymers. Carbohydrate is the polymer form. They're going to be made up of monosaccharides, which is going to be the monomer form. So the monomer of carbohydrates is monosaccharides. The polymer is a full carbohydrate. A lot of times we're going to see them serve as fuel for the human body, but like I said, they also serve a very important role in structure as well. Now, the interesting thing about carbohydrates is that they are going to be composed of only carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and they're going to be composed of them in a 1:2 to 1 ratio, meaning that for every carbon, there is 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. So if you notice that, the molecular formula is going to be CH2O, quite literally 1 carbon and a water molecule. This is where the term carbohydrate comes from. It quite literally means carbon and water. So that makes a lot of sense when you look at that structure. They're going to come in a variety of sizes. Monosaccharide will be the monomer form. Oligosaccharides will be the multiple but not quite a lot form. So 2 to 3 to 4 saccharides strung together, and then finally polysaccharides. Polysaccharides are going to be many saccharides strung together. I'm going to back up for just a second. Monosaccharides, they're also called simple sugars. Those are going to be the smallest molecular unit of a carbohydrate, and they're going to be classified according to the number of carbons that they contain. So glucose, fructose, sucrose, all of those are going to be classified based on the number of carbons that are found inside of that monomer. Oligosaccharides are going to be a few monosaccharides joined together. A couple examples of those would be sucrose, which is a disaccharide. It's a table sugar. Lactose is another small molecule disaccharide. And then finally, the polysaccharides. So we're going to take a little bit of time to look at the individual structure of each, starting with the monosaccharides. Monosaccharides, like I said before, it's going to be the monomer subunit for carbohydrates. All carbohydrates are going to be polymers made up of many monomers strung together. So they will be polysaccharides made up of monosaccharides. Again, mono meaning one, poly meaning many. Another term for a monosaccharide would be a simple sugar. Monosaccharides can have a carbon backbone of between 3 to 7 carbons. The example shown here is glucose. Glucose is a hexose. Hexose, hex meaning 6, meaning that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons. Anytime you see a ring structure like this, each one of these apexes, each one of these points that does not have an oxygen stuck in the corner or does not have another molecule stuck in the corner is going to be indicative of a carbon. So here we have our glucose. It's a hexose, a 6-membered carbon ring, and it's going to be a major source of cellular fuel for all living organisms. Oligosaccharides are going to be slightly more complex. They're going to be chains of a few monosaccharides strung together. One type is a disaccharide, mono meaning 1, di meaning 2. A disaccharide is formed from joining 2 monosaccharides together. There are several examples of everyday disaccharides. Great example would be lactose. Lactose is milk sugar. It's composed of galactose and glucose strung together. Lactose intolerant individuals lack the enzyme lactase, which breaks down lactose into galactose and glucose. So for those of you out there who are lactose intolerant, it's because you are missing that enzyme that is going to break down lactose. Another example would be sucrose. Sucrose is table sugar, that stuff that you find in your sugar shaker. I don't know if you have sugar shakers, but old-fashioned diners have sugar shakers on the table for your coffee or your whatever. So sucrose, table sugar, it's going to be composed of 2 molecules, glucose and fructose. And then maltose is another example. Maltose is composed of 2 glucose molecules strung together. So here we have glucose and fructose. When we add them together, we're going to come up with a disaccharide. Now would be a great time if anybody wants to chime in and tell me what sort of reaction are we going to use to bring glucose and fructose together to make sucrose. What sort of reaction takes one monosaccharide plus another monosaccharide and turns it into a disaccharide? All right, and then our next category, one moment, pardon me. Our next category that we're going to be looking at will be the polysaccharides. Polysaccharides are the polymer form of carbohydrates. They're made of long chains of monosaccharides all linked together. Because of their length and size, they're often referred to as complex carbohydrates. They serve a very useful purpose of short-term energy storage. When energy is needed in an organism, they only need to break them down into simple sugars. The long polymer chains are wound around in a really tight helical formation, which serves a couple of purposes. So we store our complex carbohydrates in really, really tight structures. One, this conserves space, but two, it also leaves the sugar links exposed to hydrolytic enzymes for easy access to sugar molecules. So when we need to break them down, all of those little links are exposed, making it easy to break them down into sugar or simple sugars when we need them. So here are some examples of polysaccharides. Starch is going to be used for energy storage in plants. So when plants want to store energy for a short amount of time, they're going to do it in the form of starch. Animals also store carbohydrates or also use carbohydrates as a form of short-term energy storage. I don't know if you were aware of this, but glycogen is produced by the liver, and it is our short-term energy storage in animals. So we as human beings, do we store our energy as starch or glycogen? So this is the short-term energy source that can be broken down to release glucose in animal liver and muscle cells. And then another example of a polysaccharide is going to be cellulose. Cellulose is not actually used for energy storage. It serves another purpose in plants. Does anybody know, and of course it's kind of a goofy thing to ask, but maybe I will ask it during our discussion group in the evening, what is the purpose of cellulose? What do we gain from cellulose? It has a very important purpose in the cell walls of plants. Plants do produce cellulose for very important reasons. They don't make it willy-nilly. Cellulose also has a very important function in our daily in our daily diet as animals. We cannot digest cellulose, but it does serve a very important purpose to us. The interesting thing about cellulose, it is the most abundant organic molecule on Earth. There is more cellulose than any other organic molecule on the face of this earth. Funnily enough, most animals cannot digest cellulose. Great exception of these would be termites. Termites have the ability to digest cellulose. So anyway, come back at me with the purpose of cellulose. Why do plants produce cellulose? And why do animals, what benefit does cellulose have for animals? So our next bit, here's just an example of what glycogen looks like inside of the liver cells, how we can use it to store energy. And then here is also plant cells using cellulose as a structural polysaccharide. All right, and that's it for our discussion on carbohydrates. I'll see you in a moment for our discussion on lipids.